The sun dipped low over the sprawling desert, painting the sky in shades of amber, rose, and gold. Elena rode her horse steadily, her long hair catching the breeze, the weight of the journey pressing against her shoulders. She had traveled days across the rugged mesas and canyons, guided by old maps and whispered tales about a hidden Apache village where her family's legacy might still linger. The landscape stretched endlessly, a vast wilderness of sandstone cliffs and desert scrub, unbroken except by the distant outline of adobe dwellings. Clinging to the edges of a canyon, Elena's heart thrummed with a mixture of excitement and anxiety. She had always been fiercely independent, used to relying on her own wits and courage. Yet now, as she approached the village, a strange nervousness settled over her. The Apache people had rules she didn't fully understand, traditions that had been passed down through generations, and she feared her presence, though well-intentioned, might disrupt their delicate balance. As she reached the village, the air seemed to shift. Children's laughter echoed faintly from a courtyard, and the scent of sage and fire mingled in the breeze. She dismounted, brushing sand from her skirt, and paused at the edge of the village. That was when she noticed him, the chief. Kian stood atop a small rise near the center of the village, his posture commanding yet relaxed. Dark hair framed his strong face, and his eyes, intense and deep, seemed to pierce right through her. There was a calm authority about him, a presence that made her pulse quicken. He watched her closely as if he had known she would arrive. His gaze steady, unyielding, and strangely compelling. Elena reminded herself to breathe. She had come with purpose, and no amount of awe should deter her. Yet, as she stepped forward, she instinctively hesitated. In her eagerness, she unknowingly ignored a simple village custom, a gesture of respect that was customary when entering the communal space. A murmur ran through the small crowd of villagers who had begun to notice the outsider. Kian's expression didn't change, but Elena could feel the weight of his eyes, a quiet, magnetic force that made her heart pound in ways she didn't fully understand. He descended from his perch with measured steps, moving toward her with a calm grace that contrasted the sudden tension in the air. "You are far from home," he said, his voice smooth yet firm, carrying authority without harshness. "Why have you come to our village?" Elena's throat was dry. She bowed slightly, a mix of respect and apprehension. "I seek knowledge and guidance," she said. "My family. We lost our connection to this land. I hope to find what was once ours, or at least understand it." Kian studied her for a long moment. There was no anger in his eyes, only curiosity and an unspoken question. Does she truly belong here, or is she merely a visitor unaware of what she's entering? Elena sensed the challenge in his gaze, though he made no demand, issued no threat. His presence alone was enough to test her resolve, for reasons she could not name. Elena felt a pull toward him, a strange mixture of fear and fascination. He was not merely a man of authority, he seemed a force of nature itself, steady and unyielding, yet capable of gentleness. Something in the way he held himself, the faint tilt of his head, the quiet intensity in his dark eyes, made her heart beat faster than it had in years. The villagers waited silently, sensing the unspoken tension. Elena straightened her shoulders, drawing on every ounce of courage she possessed. She knew that respect alone would not be enough to navigate this first encounter. She would need to demonstrate her integrity, her patience, and perhaps, if fate allowed, her ability to connect with Kian beyond mere words. As the sun finally touched the horizon, casting long shadows across the adobe roofs and dusty ground, Elena took a deep breath. She stepped forward, meeting Kian's gaze fully, aware that this moment, this first step into a world she barely understood, would shape everything that followed. And though she did not yet know it, the spark between them had already been ignited, a silent promise of the connection that would soon grow stronger than any rule, any expectation, or any chain. The desert wind swirled around them, carrying the scent of sage and the warmth of the dying sun. Elena felt the pull of the land, the weight of history, and the magnetic force of Kian's eyes, binding her heart in a way that was at once exhilarating and terrifying. In that instant, She realized that this journey was not only about discovering her family's past, it was about discovering herself, and perhaps discovering a love that neither of them could yet name. Morning light spilled over the village, turning the adobe walls a warm honey color. The air was crisp, carrying the faint scent of smoke from early fires and the earthy aroma of the desert. Elena awoke with the first rays brushing her face, her heart still fluttering from the previous evening's encounter with Kian, the Apache chief. She had not slept well, not from fear, but from anticipation. There was a sense of something monumental awaiting her, though she could not yet name it. She dressed quietly, aware that today might be pivotal. Her clothing, simple but respectful, was not the adornment of a visitor seeking favor, but the garb of someone willing to honor tradition. Her pulse quickened as she approached the courtyard where the villagers had gathered. Kian was already there, standing with the poise of someone who belonged to the land itself. His dark eyes scanned the faces of the villagers, then settled on her. The quiet intensity in his gaze reminded her of a storm contained within a mountain, powerful, yet restrained. "You have come far," Kian said, his voice carrying both acknowledgement and challenge. "And yet arriving is not enough. Respect for our ways is not earned through words alone." Elena swallowed hard, nodding, though uncertainty gnawed at her. She had hoped her journey would be welcomed, but she quickly understood that entering this world required more than courage. It demanded understanding, sensitivity, and a willingness to embrace the unknown. "You will demonstrate your understanding in a way that reflects who you are," Kian continued. "You may not yet know the full weight of our customs, but you can show the spirit within your heart. That spirit will speak louder than any act of obedience." The challenge was subtle yet profound. It was not a command but a test-a-call to prove herself not through submission but through insight, empathy, and initiative. Elena felt a spark of both fear and excitement. This was a chance to show Kian, and perhaps herself, that she belonged. In a space larger than her fears, Kian led her to a nearby grove, where wildflowers bloomed amidst rocky terrain. A quiet stream trickled through, reflecting the morning sun like liquid crystal. "You will carry water from this spring to the village center," he said. "But do so in a way that honors the land and the people?" Elena raised an eyebrow, uncertainty flickering in her gaze. The task seemed simple, yet she understood that it was layered with significance. It was a lesson in patience, in mindfulness, in seeing beyond the obvious. She nodded and approached the spring, cupping her hands to gather the water as she walked. She noticed every detail, the way the light danced on the rippling surface, the subtle whisper of the wind through the leaves, the quiet presence of a deer watching from a distance. She moved deliberately, aware that Kian's eyes were on her, following her steps with quiet scrutiny. Every small gesture, every thoughtful choice mattered. When she reached the village center, carrying the water in a simple vessel, Kian observed. Silently, Elena carefully poured the water into a basin placed for ceremonial use, her hands steady, her mind focused. The villagers watched, some with curiosity, others with cautious approval. Elena felt a quiet pride swelling within her, not for the task itself, but for the way she had approached it, with respect, attention, and integrity. Kian stepped forward, his dark eyes softened, a trace of a smile tugging at his lips. "You have shown understanding," he said. "Not merely of our customs, but of yourself. That is far more important than obedience." Elena's chest lifted with relief and a subtle thrill. In that moment, she realized that the challenge was never about control. It was about connection between the individual and the community, and between two hearts beginning to recognize one another. She glanced at Kian, noticing for the first time the way the morning light caught the edges of his face, making him appear at once strong and approachable, commanding yet quietly kind. For the first time, Elena felt the stirrings of trust, not blind trust, but the kind that comes from seeing the intentions of another clearly and choosing to meet them with your own heart. She was beginning to understand that this land, these people, and perhaps Kian himself, were a part of a journey larger than she had imagined. As the villagers returned to their morning routines, Elena and Kean lingered a moment longer, their eyes meeting in a silent acknowledgement. There was no rush, no pressure, just the quiet understanding that the bond between them was forming, fragile yet undeniable. And in that shared glance, Elena felt something she had never anticipated, the exhilarating sense that defiance and respect could coexist, and that perhaps through her own courage, she could unlock a connection stronger than any rule, any expectation, or any chain. The desert sun climbed higher, painting the mesas in warm, golden tones. Keon led Elena along a narrow trail winding between sandstone cliffs, their shadows stretching long across the rocky path. The village receded behind them, leaving only the vast wilderness and the quiet murmur of the wind through sparse scrub and sage. The task he had assigned, retrieving sacred herbs from a spring hidden deep within the canyon, was ostensibly simple, yet it carried a deeper purpose. This path is not only about reaching the spring, Keon said, his voice calm, echoing slightly off the canyon walls. It is about understanding the land, its spirit, and the balance we must honor. Elena nodded, her hands brushing against the rugged stone for balance. Her heart raced, not from fear of the climb, but from the intensity of Keon's presence. He walked with a measured grace, each step deliberate yet effortless, like he belonged to the desert itself. His dark eyes occasionally flicked to her, and though his expression remained composed, there was a softness there that made her pulse quicken. They walked in silence for a while, the quiet only broken by the soft rustle of leaves and the distant cry of a hawk. Elena's mind wandered, tracing the contours of the land and the mystery of the man beside her. She was a stranger to this world, yet she felt inexplicably drawn to it and to him. The tension she had felt upon arrival was transforming into something else: curiosity, admiration, and a subtle, unspoken attraction. Eventually, they reached the spring, a hidden oasis framed by tall cliffs where water shimmered in the sunlight like molten glass. Wildflowers clustered around its edges, and the air was cool and fragrant, a sharp contrast to the arid heat of the desert beyond. Keon knelt by the water's edge, scooping a handful to drink, and then gestured for Elena to do the same. As she knelt beside him, the sound of the water rippling over the stones was hypnotic. Elena found herself speaking, though she had not intended to share so much. "I've always felt out of place," she admitted softly. "Even in the towns I grew up in, there was always a part of me that didn't belong. I thought I was searching for my family's history, but maybe I'm really searching for something I've been missing all along." Keon listened, his dark eyes never leaving hers. "Loneliness can shape a person," he said quietly. "It can make them strong, or it can make them cautious. You carry your independence with pride, but I see that beneath it there is a longing, a need for connection." Elena's breath caught at the accuracy of his words. How could a man she had known barely a day understand her so clearly? There was a warmth in his gaze, a mixture of respect and empathy that was disarming. She had expected judgment or authority, but instead she felt seen, acknowledged in a way that made her heart ache. For a long moment neither spoke. They were simply two souls sitting side by side in the quiet oasis, the desert cliffs enclosing them in a cocoon of serenity. Elena watched the sunlight dance across the water, reflecting fragments of Keon's face in the ripples. He, in turn, seemed lost in thought, the calm desert giving him space to reveal a side of himself rarely shown to anyone. Finally, Keon spoke, his voice almost a whisper. "There is courage in being alone, yes, but there is also courage in letting another, and even just a little. That is the lesson this land teaches us." Elena turned to him, surprised by the vulnerability in his tone. The desert had a way of stripping away pretense, leaving only the essence of who one truly was. She felt a connection forming, subtle, but undeniable, a thread weaving between them stronger than any spoken word. As the afternoon light began to fade, they stood together and prepared to return to the village. Elena carried the herbs carefully, feeling a new sense of purpose. And as they walked side by side along the canyon trail, she realized that the journey was no longer just about finding her family's heritage. It was about discovering a bond, delicate yet unbreakable, that was growing in the silence and solitude of the desert. Keon's eyes lingered on her more than once, And though they exchanged no touch, no words of affection, the unspoken promise was clear. This was only the beginning. Their hearts, drawn together by respect, curiosity, and an unspoken attraction, were already entwined in a rhythm stronger than any chain could bind. The wind carried the scent of sage and wildflowers as they made their way back, and Elena felt a thrill of anticipation for what lay ahead, a journey that would test their spirits, deepen their connection, and awaken a love as vast and enduring as the desert itself. The village buzzed with life as the sun dipped toward the horizon, painting the adobe walls in fiery shades of orange and crimson. Today was the festival, a celebration of the land, the seasons, and the unity of the community. Music floated through the air, drums beating a steady rhythm, flutes weaving soft melodies, and the laughter of children running barefoot across the courtyard. Elena followed Kian along the winding paths, marveling at the vivid decorations. Garlands of wildflowers, colorful banners fluttering in the warm breeze, and clay torches casting flickering light even before the sun had fully set. "This is one of the most important traditions of our people," Kian said, his voice calm but resonant over the gentle chaos of the celebration. "It is a time to honor our ancestors, our land, and the bonds that connect us all. But it is also a time for you to observe and understand without judgment, without hesitation." Elena nodded, absorbing every detail. Her eyes wandered across the courtyard, watching villagers perform intricate dances, their feet moving in perfect rhythm, their arms and hands telling stories as old as the land itself. The music seemed to speak directly to her heart, weaving threads of belonging she hadn't known she'd been missing. "Would you like to try?" Kian asked, his dark eyes fixed on her with a mixture of amusement and gentle challenge. Elena hesitated, aware of her outsider status. But she saw the subtle encouragement in his gaze, the quiet invitation to step beyond her comfort zone. She nodded, stepping toward the circle of dancers. As she joined the group, Kian stood nearby, watching closely. Her movements were unsure. At first awkward even, but she gradually found a rhythm, letting the music guide her. When her hand brushed against another dancer's, she smiled, feeling the warmth of the community and the joy of participation. Kian's eyes followed her every move, not with scrutiny, but with admiration. At one point, she nearly stumbled over the hem of her skirt, a small misstep that drew a few stifled chuckles from onlookers. Before embarrassment could take hold, Kian stepped closer, offering his hand to steady her. Their fingers brushed, a spark passing between them that made Elena's heart skip. She looked up at him, meeting his gaze for just a moment, and saw something unspoken there, a mixture of respect, amusement, and a quiet connection that went beyond words. The dance ended, but the festival continued. Villagers shared food and stories, and the air was filled with the scent of roasted corn and sweet berries. Kian walked beside Elena, explaining the significance of each ritual, each gesture, each song. She listened intently, fascinated by the depth of meaning behind every detail. "You are learning quickly," he said after a pause, his tone softening. "Not just about the festival, but about understanding people, about observing with your heart as much as your eyes." Elena felt a warmth spread through her chest. She realized that her journey was no longer just about seeking her family's heritage. It was about connecting with a culture, a land, and a man whose presence made her feel simultaneously challenged and safe. As the evening wore on, the villagers gathered around a central fire, its flames crackling and casting golden light across their faces. Kian and Elena stood slightly apart, sharing a quiet moment amidst the celebration. The flickering firelight reflected in his eyes, making them seem even darker, deeper, and more compelling. Elena noticed a subtle shift in the way he looked at her, a softness that contrasted with the strong authority he carried earlier. She realized that while she had entered the village as a visitor, she was beginning to matter in ways she hadn't expected. Her courage, curiosity, and willingness to engage with the community had earned him not only respect but genuine admiration. The festival reached its climax as villagers danced around the fire, their voices lifted in song, the drums echoing through the canyon. Elena joined in, moving with newfound confidence, feeling the rhythm of the land and the pulse of the people. And as she danced, her eyes occasionally met Keon's, the unspoken understanding between them growing stronger with each glance. For the first time, Elena understood that connection was not about obedience or compliance, it was about presence, respect, and openness. And in that moment, surrounded by music, laughter, and firelight, she felt a bond forming that was as natural and enduring as the desert itself. The festival faded into night, but the warmth of the shared experience lingered. Elena walked beside Keon as the last of the villagers returned to their homes, the desert night stretching wide and silent around them. And in the quiet after the celebration, the thread between their hearts felt taut and unbroken, a promise of deeper understanding, respect, and the beginnings of love that neither had yet dared to name. The desert night had fallen completely, blanketing the village in a deep blue darkness sprinkled with stars. The festival's firelight had faded, leaving only the faint glow of torches along the paths and the silver shimmer of the moon on the canyon walls. Elena walked beside Keon, their steps quiet on the sandy trail that led toward the cliff's edge overlooking the vast desert below. The day's energy had given way to a serene calm, and the stillness made every sound, every whisper of wind, every shift of sand feel intimate, almost sacred. "Elena," Keon began, his voice low, careful not to disturb the delicate quiet of the night. He paused, as if measuring his words against the vast expanse around them. "You have shown great courage in joining our village, in learning our ways. But I sense there is more within you. Something you keep hidden, even from yourself." Elena's heart beat faster. She had been aware of his gaze all evening, of the subtle awareness in the way he watched her. But now, in the intimacy of the moonlit desert, it felt more personal, more potent. She looked at him, seeing the calm strength in his posture, the faint tension in his jaw, the vulnerability in his dark eyes. I've always been cautious about letting people in," she admitted softly, her voice barely above a whisper. "Even those I trust. I thought independence meant keeping my heart to myself, but somehow I feel different with you." Keon stopped walking, turning to face her fully. The moonlight painted his features in sharp relief, highlighting the contours of his face, the intensity of his eyes, the subtle softness in his expression. He took a step closer, careful to maintain space, yet closing the emotional distance. "Independence is not weakness," he said. "It is strength. And courage is not only in facing the outside world, but in allowing someone to know your heart. That is a lesson few learn." Elena swallowed, feeling the truth of his words resonate deep within her. She realized she had been resisting something she could no longer ignore, a growing connection, a pull toward him that went beyond admiration or respect. The desert around them seemed to hold its breath, as if waiting for the moment when they might fully acknowledge what had quietly begun between them. Keon's voice softened further, almost a caress. "I cannot tell you what the future holds, nor would I ask you to give up your freedom, but I must be honest. You have captured my attention, Elena, in a way that has never happened before. Your spirit, your courage, your heart, they speak to me." Elena's chest tightened. For a moment, words failed her entirely. She had expected authority, perhaps admiration, but this heartfelt confession was something she had not anticipated. The desert wind brushed past them, carrying the faint scent of sage and distant flowers, as if nature itself was witnessing their moment. She began, then paused, searching for the right words. "I feel the same. I didn't want to admit it, not yet, but I cannot deny it anymore. You've awakened something in me I didn't even know I was missing." Keon smiled, a slow, genuine smile that softened his usually composed demeanor. He extended his hand, not demanding, not taking, but offering. Elena looked at it, then met his gaze, and in that silent exchange, they both understood the unspoken promise, mutual respect, care, and the beginnings of love that honored both. Their hearts and independence, they stood together, side by side, looking out over the desert. The moonlight shimmered across the dunes and mesas, casting long shadows that merged around them, a visual echo of the bond forming between their hearts. Elena felt a warmth spread through her chest, a sense of being seen, understood, and valued for who she truly was. And in Kian's presence, she discovered the exhilarating truth that attraction and respect could coexist, growing quietly, naturally, without force. "I am not asking you to change," Kian said gently, breaking the silence. "Only to walk beside me as equals, if you choose. That is all I seek." Elena's lips curved into a small, relieved smile. "I will walk beside you," she said softly, "not because I must, but because I want to." The desert wind carried their shared laughter, faint but joyful, across the cliffs. Stars reflected in their eyes, mirroring the unspoken connection that had deepened with every shared glance, every quiet moment. And though the night was still and vast around them, Elena knew that this was only the beginning, a journey of understanding, respect, and a love that neither had yet dared to name aloud, but both felt in the depths of their hearts. The next morning, the village awoke to the gentle light of dawn, the desert bathed in soft golden hues. Birds chirped among the cliffs, and the scent of sage and morning dew filled the air. Elena moved quietly through the courtyard, tending to small tasks, arranging herbs, helping children gather firewood, and observing the rhythms of village life. For the first time, she felt a genuine sense of belonging, a delicate thread weaving her into this community. Yet, despite the serenity of the morning, a quiet tension hung in the air. Rumors had begun to circulate, misunderstandings fueled by curiosity and caution. Some villagers whispered that Elena's interest in the festival and the sacred spring was unusual, that her presence was too bold, too assertive. Though they had welcomed her with smiles yesterday, their words now carried hints of suspicion. Kian noticed the subtle shift immediately. He had been nearby, observing the interactions, and though he understood the villagers' concern, his heart tightened at the thought that Elena might be hurt or misunderstood. He approached her just as she was straightening a line of pots along the courtyard. "Elena," he said gently, his voice low enough for only her to hear, "there are questions being asked. I hope you know these are not judgments of you as a person. The village is cautious by nature, especially with those new among us." Elena straightened, meeting his gaze. "I understand," she said softly, though a flutter of unease stirred in her chest. "I did not mean to overstep." Kian's eyes, dark and intense, held hers. "It is not overstepping that concerns me," he said. "It is that sometimes your independence, your spirit, can be misunderstood. People see defiance where there is none. You must be patient with their eyes, just as you are patient with your own heart." Elena nodded, but inwardly she felt a pang of frustration. She had come here seeking understanding, acceptance, and connection, yet she could sense the invisible walls of suspicion forming around her. She wondered if her courage and honesty were too much for them to comprehend, too different from what they expected in a visitor. As the day progressed, the tension only grew. Elena caught snippets of whispered conversations, villagers questioning her motives, Kian's decisions, even her presence in the sacred spaces. Her chest tightened with an ache she had not expected. She loved this land, this culture, and she trusted Kian, but now doubt began to creep in. Did she truly belong here? Had her independence created distance rather than connection? Seeing her pause by the spring, looking down at the rippling water as if seeking answers in its reflection, Kian approached. "Elena," he said softly, resting a hand on the rock beside her, careful to give her space. "Do not let their whispers cloud your heart. You have done nothing wrong." Elena turned to him, her eyes shimmering with emotion. I thought being honest and brave would be enough," she admitted. "But it feels like no matter what I do, it's seen differently here." Kian's gaze softened, his usual commanding presence replaced with a rare vulnerability. "I see you," he said quietly. "Not the whispers, not the judgments, not the misunderstandings. I see your heart, your courage, your spirit. That is all that matters to me. And you must remember, you are not alone here. Not if you do not wish to be." Elena felt warmth spread through her chest, a mixture of relief and quiet admiration. His words reminded her why she had been drawn to him from the very beginning. His ability to see beyond appearances, to understand what was real and true. Even in the face of misunderstanding, Kian's respect and patience were unwavering. For a long moment they stood in silence. The desert wind carrying the scent of sage and wildflowers, the water of the spring reflecting their faces in soft ripples. In that quiet, shared solitude, Elena realized something important. Misunderstandings could arise, but they need not break the bonds that had begun to form between them. Trust and patience, once given, could withstand the whispers of doubt. She met Kian's gaze and found reassurance there, the unspoken promise of understanding and care wrapping around her heart. For the first time since arriving in the village, Elena felt certain not of how others saw her, but of how she and Kian were beginning to see each other. And in that realization, a quiet courage bloomed, stronger and steadier than ever before, ready to face the challenges of tomorrow. The desert sky was painted in soft pinks and purples as the sun began its slow descent, casting a warm glow over the village. Elena walked along a narrow trail toward the sacred spring, her thoughts tangled with the events of the past day. The whispers of the villagers had weighed on her, leaving her unsure of her place, even as she felt the bond with Kian growing stronger. She sought clarity and perhaps forgiveness, not from anyone else, but from the tension in her own heart. Kian waited at the edge of the spring, his silhouette framed by the golden light. As she approached, he turned, his eyes locking with hers. There was no anger, no judgment, only the quiet, steady presence she had come to rely upon. His gaze softened as he took a step closer, the distance between them closing but still respectful. "Elena," he began, his voice calm, yet carrying the weight of sincerity. "I should have spoken sooner. I let the village's whispers affect me, and I fear it caused you doubt where there should have been none. I apologize for any hurt it brought you." Elena felt her chest lift at his words, a wave of relief mingled with warmth spreading through her. "Kian," she said softly, "it's not your fault. The whispers. They are part of life here. I let them get to me. I should have remembered that you see more than the surface, that you understand hearts, not rumors." He nodded, a faint smile tugging at the corners of his lips. "And yet, we are both human. Misunderstandings happen. What matters is how we move past them." They walked together along the spring's edge, the cool water reflecting the soft hues of the desert sky. Elena carried the herbs they had gathered earlier, now tied neatly in a bundle, while Kian kept a careful watch, his presence both protective and unassuming. There was a rhythm to their steps, a quiet harmony that seemed to speak louder than words. "I never want you to feel you must hide your spirit to fit in," Kian said gently, glancing at her. "Your courage, your independence, they are why I admire you. You challenge me in ways I did not know I needed, and yet you do it with such grace that I cannot help but be drawn to you." Elena's heart fluttered. These words, so honest and unguarded, resonated deep within her. She had feared that her boldness might push him away, that her defiance could fracture the delicate connection they were building. Yet here he was, acknowledging it, embracing it even, with a respect that made her feel seen in a way few ever had. "Kian," she whispered, her voice carrying a mix of vulnerability and strength, "I never wanted to cause doubt or tension. I only wanted to belong, to understand, and to be true to myself. And I think I feel something for you that I cannot ignore." He stepped closer, though still leaving space for comfort and choice. "And I feel the same," he said, his tone earnest, eyes unwavering. "It is not just admiration or respect, it is something deeper, something that grows quietly, but with strength. I do not want to pressure you, only to walk beside you, if you will allow it." For a long moment, Elena studied his face, tracing the contours in the fading sunlight, seeing the sincerity and patience in his gaze. She realized that connection did not need to be rushed, that love could emerge slowly, nurtured by understanding and respect. Slowly, she reached out, resting her hand lightly on his forearm, a gesture of trust, affirmation, and mutual care. Kian's eyes softened further, and he mirrored the gesture with gentle respect. There was no need for grand declarations or dramatic moments. Their bond was already solidifying in these quiet exchanges, built on patience, empathy, and shared courage. The desert around them seemed to hold its breath, as if the very land approved of this reconciliation, of the gentle promise forming between their hearts. They remained there until the first stars appeared, side by side at the spring, hands almost touching, their shared smiles carrying the unspoken understanding that the challenge, the misunderstanding, and the tension had only strengthened their connection. It was a bond formed not from force, but from respect, trust, and the slow, steady pull of two hearts choosing one another. As they finally turned to return to the village, the night air filled with the scent of sage and wildflowers, Elena felt a quiet certainty settle over her. Whatever whispers or doubts might linger in the village, she knew that with Keon, she had found a connection that could weather misunderstanding, honor individuality, and grow into a love stronger than any obstacle. The first light of dawn stretched across the desert, painting the cliffs and mesas in soft gold and rose hues. A gentle wind carried the scent of sage and wildflowers through the village, and the air felt crisp, clean, and full of promise. Today, Elena and Keon walked together not as a visitor-in-chief, but as two people bound by trust, respect, and a connection that had grown slowly, carefully, and undeniably. Elena adjusted the bundle of herbs she had carried since the spring, now tied with a ribbon of soft leather. Keon walked beside her, his steps measured and calm, but the faint lift of his lips betrayed a quiet happiness. For the first time since her arrival, Elena felt entirely at ease, seen, understood, and valued for who she was. The misunderstandings of the past had been resolved, replaced by mutual trust, and a bond that neither whispered nor rumor could disrupt. They stopped at a small overlook, where the desert stretched endlessly, dunes and cliffs rolling into the horizon. Keon turned to Elena, his eyes dark, steady, and filled with a rare warmth. "This land," he said softly, "has a way of teaching us patience, resilience, and connection. It reveals who we truly are when we are willing to see and be seen." Elena smiled, feeling the truth of his words in every fiber of her being. "I have learned more than I ever imagined," she admitted. "About the land, about the people, and about myself. I came seeking knowledge of my family, but I found something far greater, a place to belong, and someone who sees me as I truly am." Keon reached out, his hand brushing lightly against hers. The gesture was simple, understated, yet it carried the weight of unspoken promises, respect, care, and a shared journey forward. "And I have found," he said, "someone whose spirit is as strong as the land itself. Someone who challenges me, inspires me, and walks beside me, not because she must, but because she chooses to." Elena's heart swelled with emotion. The desert around them, so vast and timeless, seemed to echo the profound connection forming between them. She realized that love, like this land, was not about haste or possession. It was about presence, understanding, and shared courage. She had resisted the idea at first, cautious and independent, yet now she understood. Choosing to walk beside someone willingly, openly, and with respect was one of the bravest acts of all. They lingered at the overlook, watching as the sun climbed higher, casting long shadows across the sands and illuminating the adobe roofs of the village far below. Children's laughter rose faintly in the distance, and the soft murmur of villagers going about their day reminded them of the life they were part of, one built on community, trust, and mutual respect. "Elena," Keon said, his voice gentle, yet carrying certainty, "the bond between us is not born from force, nor from expectation. It is born from understanding, patience, and choice. And that is what makes it enduring. Whatever comes next, we face it together, equally, openly." Elena reached up, placing her hand over his, and smiled. "Together," she echoed, feeling the words settle in her heart like a promise. "We will face whatever comes together." For a long moment they stood in quiet communion, side by side, hands nearly touching, eyes meeting in shared understanding. Around them the desert seemed alive, the wind shifting through the cliffs, the distant mountains glowing in morning light, the sky a vast expanse of hope and possibility. As they finally began to walk back toward the village, their steps aligned. Their spirits intertwined. Elena felt a profound certainty. She had arrived as a stranger, courageous but cautious, seeking knowledge of her past. She would leave, or rather, continue her journey not only with understanding but with a connection that was as enduring. Vast and resilient as the desert itself, the desert stretched before them, infinite and inviting, and with Kian by her side, Elena felt ready for whatever adventures awaited. The past was honored, the present cherished, and the future a shared. Luminous horizon awaited with open arms. In the quiet strength of the desert morning, two hearts walked forward together, free, equal, and bound by respect, trust, and the gentle, unbreakable power of love. A new beginning had dawned, not dictated by fate, whispers, or expectation, but by choice, courage, and the unspoken promise of shared journeys yet to come.